Hello, everyone. This is Kati Goshtaspi. Welcome to the Kati G podcast series, especially this sub-series of my podcast, which is the Women Lawyers Making a Difference. The mission of my podcast in general is for us to really realize that we are great and that we can be even greater and really bring that brand greatness to the world through what we do for a living and through our purpose and through who we are. I do this podcast for two reasons. One, because I truly care about our humanity deeply. And as business people, we got to remember we're people first, and business is very personal, and business is about us. And I want us all to see how great we really are, to be happier and to produce results in our business, whatever that means for you. And the second reason I do this podcast is, look, I'm no different than you. I struggle with my own feelings of being less than, having sat in your shoes as a woman lawyer, as a securities lawyer. I get you. I know the pain, and I know that some days are ugly and some days are fantastic. And the point is to be okay with wherever we are with all that. So I love to bring women lawyers to this podcast sub-series that are really making a difference, hence the name, people, right? And this time you're in for a real treat because I have with us today Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. She is an immigration and bankruptcy lawyer in Austin, Texas. And Kate's a rock star. So are all my other podcast guests, frankly. But in her own right, I have known Kate for years and years now. I was trying to think back to how long I've known you, Kate. Welcome, first of all.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you. I know how busy you are. I was telling Kate before we started recording that I got on her website and I cannot believe how big the business has become. Like, it's unbelievable how many employees you have and the yellow branding with the goldfinch. And I just think it's amazing. If you all want to see the progression of how a woman on a mission as an immigration lawyer, as any lawyer, as a person with a purpose, has grown the practice. And by no means is it, in my opinion, been easy, but I'll let you tell them yourself, Kate. But just steadily grown the business because she means well and because she cares. And if you wonder about that, you can watch any of her interviews because Kate's she's a TV celebrity. She does so many interviews, and I've watched her interviews, and she just handled herself with such grace. So tell us whatever you want us to know about your background and your story and how you got to where you are, so that we can learn a little bit about you and your humanity and how that grew into a brand and into the business.
Sure, thanks. So I'm from Austin, Texas, and I primarily a mom. I have two daughters who are 9 and 4, and I work at the firm with my husband, who's the manager of the bankruptcy division. And I am an immigration lawyer. Kati, you said I'm a bankruptcy lawyer. I know enough to talk about bankruptcy, but I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer. I'm an immigration lawyer at my core, and I didn't know that when I went to law school. I knew that I wanted to do social justice work and public interest work. And I had previously worked in Democratic politics. And so I thought maybe something along, in politics. But I really went into law school with an open mind. And I felt really confused because I thought at that point that, like, you're either a big law attorney or you're a public interest lawyer, and then at some point you might go in-house, if you're big law. I thought we all fit into boxes that small. And now, whatever, 15 years out, when I scan my friends, it's like not one of us is doing the same thing,
Right? Yeah.
But my journey was that I signed up for the immigration clinic as one of my, many internships and trials. And my first assignment was to do an intake with a family that was detained. They were seeking asylum. And it was a mom and a dad and a little baby. And their baby was a 5-month-old little girl. And they were all wearing prison uniforms, including the baby.
Oh,
and I was raised in Austin in a pretty progressive area, in a pretty liberal home, and I really believed in the story of America and diversity and the Statue of Liberty. And that day, doing that intake with this detained baby, like, rocked me to my core, and it just changed everything for me when I saw this little baby in jail, and her mother asked me if I could take her with me and take care of her until he could get out. And I was able to represent that family. I couldn't take their baby out, of course, but I was able to represent them as a student attorney and win their asylum case. And that was like
Oh.
the most amazing experience. And then pretty much I was hooked. You know, it was like, okay, I found it. I found my calling and my career. And so I got to work with detained families seeking asylum for a few years doing a fellowship, and then went into private practice, and then started my own firm. And I've always maintained a connection to migrant families, and my primary motivating belief is that families belong together. And so I always want to bring and keep immigrant families together. And we recently painted a mural on the office that
I
says,
saw that.
yeah, it says
Tell
Familias
us
Sin
what this.
Fronteras. Yeah, which is, it's in Spanish, and it means families without borders. And so it's like, that's what it's all about. That's what it comes down to. And
What a beautiful story. Oh my gosh, I'm in tears. So, how does that happen? You're my first guest who's, well, actually, you're probably not my first guest who's left me in tears, but I think I really identify with you, not just because of what the past 4 years have meant for immigration and those families. And I've seen you be very active, really owning your truth and being fearless about it, because we all have a voice and we all should be able to. Um, Make our case and make our stand. And really, that's what we want to talk about today. But to get there, I used to always think I was an immigrant. And then 2 years ago, a year ago, my book editor said, "You realize you're a refugee, don't you?" And I said, I'm 49 years old. What are you talking about? And she said, "You're not an immigrant, you're a refugee, dear." And so I really get that. We don't have the exact same story, but I think maybe that's why I become so emotional about that story, because I have sat in those shoes one way or another. And so I tend to think what you think. If there had meant to be true borders and walls, then I think whoever you believe in, the bigger source, the bigger God, or whatever you want to call it, it's not meant to be religious. Please don't write me and tell me that. Would have created those fake walls and borders, right? And so there's a point to order and law, and you and I both being lawyers,
sure.
we get that, but there's also the humanity of it and the aspect of freedom, which is one of my core values. So in August this month, this Women's Equality Month is August 26th, but I decided to turn the whole month into women's equality, because I work with so many women lawyers that say, I can't find my voice. I can't figure out who I am. I don't understand my purpose. I went to law school, and now with the pandemic, Kate, it's even worse, because the results of a survey came out between the DC Bar and the California Lawyers Association, and they found awful things about what the pandemic has done to the legal community, to lawyers, but really women lawyers in particular were almost labeled as alcoholics now, unfortunately, and we're super stressed with trying to juggle being parents and everything else in our lives. And I love how you led with who you are. You're a mother. That's what you said first, and then you're a lawyer. Um, and so I really wanted the focus this month to be on, where is our value? Where is our voice? How do we make sure we're heard, and that we get to practice the law that we want to practice, but remember who we are at our core, because I always say authentic brands win. And so that we can get up every day and serve that purpose. Otherwise, there's no motivation. And so it's stifling. So I really wanted your take on this, because you are super busy. You're no less busy than anyone else, and probably even more so, frankly. I love how you said you work at the firm, but you start at the firm, and all these lawyers at some capacity report to you. You're very modest. And there's a lot of juggling going on, and you've got a lot of things with housing right now in your personal life. You can share all that, because I think a lot of women would really appreciate that, but up to you. But the point is, how do you keep that sense of harmony for yourself? And how do you make sure your voice is heard and your values are heard while you respect others? Because I've heard your interviews, and, when you do those very national, let's call it confrontational, edgy interviews with the other side, people come at you, but you hold your own, and you seem to have a way of respecting other people's opinions while holding your own. So share with us how you do this and what your lessons are for us.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, it's specifically to the part about, I'm an immigration lawyer, and I have decided to be loud and proud about it. And so I get invited to, debate Stephen Miller on the Laura Ingraham show on Fox News. And, that it's part of what I've decided to do. And I guess the reason that I'm able to not get agitated is because I'm so clear. I've done over a decade of research on the numbers, on top of all of the anecdotal stories I have, having worked with thousands of families. Like, I know the reality of what Central American migrant kids are fleeing, and why the families make the gut-wrenching decision to send children across the border alone. And I know that because I've talked to hundreds of them. And I don't care what Stephen Miller says about it or what Laura Ingraham says about it. They're wrong. And so as long as I can just stay in my truth and tell the story from that perspective, it's going to persuade somebody. And actually, that particular interview, I really wanted to say no. I was like about to be off work that night. It was like, no, I was not planning this for my evening. And somebody, I think it was my husband, was like, what do you get out of this? Like, what's the point? What's the reason to do this? And it's like, well, maybe, just maybe, somebody will hear me say, based on my experience, this is what I'm seeing, and it will just slightly change the mind, the mood, the rhetoric in some little pocket or in some little household where some little kid is listening. And if that's all that it did, well, then it was worth whatever it took of my time, 30 minutes of my time. And so I'm sort of like, you can't get at me with the opposing viewpoint, because I'm so firm in, frankly, just being on the right side of history on immigration issues. I mean, it's like, one of the things I've studied is immigration policy historically in the United States. And, talking about, like, if you look at the cartoons of, the Irish Catholics or the Italian immigrants or the Jewish immigrants or the Chinese immigrants, I mean, they are depicted in these cartoons that went in the newspapers as rats, as locusts, as, criminals bringing disease, all of the, just like everything we hear today that is just being said loud and proud by a big segment of our population is all just totally a repeat. Nothing is new. And I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but anyway, why am I able to do it? Because it's like, it's so clear to me what the truth is.
So if I had to summarize what you just said for our listeners, it would be, it's a combination of the substantive clarity that you have over what you do, plus, like you said, the thousands of beautiful stories that you have that really bring the context and the perspective to it. So it's about the substantive knowledge plus the heart, really, of why you do what you do, that gets you out of bed in the morning and keeps you up to do those kind of interviews when you really don't have to. And then I think what you said was really remarkable in that, I think as women lawyers, we get caught up in the competition aspect of it. And Kate knows this because now I remember way back to how we met was she took my branding boot camp all those years ago when I taught it in Austin. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
That was so long ago. But I still, in branding boot camp, which is still running, teach that competition does not help our stress, because my research on stress and self-confidence and our brand value being really emotional and coming out well is that competition reduces that ability because it increases our stress. So a lot of women lawyers say, well, I've got to do it a certain way and I've got to compete. And, you've got to do it your way, and the way that appeals to you, and the way that expresses your truth. And it can't be based on anybody else's methodology, because it's not authentic, and it doesn't resonate with you. And then it certainly doesn't resonate with your audience. And you can't be afraid of what you're going to say, but you do have to be respectful of other people's opinions, I found over the years. And I really think that's what you're saying in summary, that you have to be willing to bring your voice, but harmonize it with other people. Does that sound fair as a summary?
Yeah, I think that does sound fair. And I had all these other thoughts as you were talking about this idea of sort of competition, and how, it's somewhat related to this idea of, like, in, debate scenario, but I think it's relevant to women lawyers who are trying to make their way in the world
Yeah.
professionally, and this idea of competition is so hard for us. And I finally have arrived, I think. I'm sure I'll get tested, tomorrow since I said it. But I finally, really, I think I can honestly say I don't believe in competition, so that when someone who seems a lot like me starts doing the same thing that I'm doing in the same space, I have a very different reaction to it than I used to.
What do
In
you
my
react with
well,
these
now
days?
it's like it's fabulous because I start seeing the synergy that's possible, or the ways that we're different, and the ways that we can refer back and forth or collaborate. And it's just after so many incidents like that, not once has someone encroached upon my sphere and lessened me in reality, even though there were many times I was worried about that. So I really love, you know, what to other people might look like competition. Somebody starting their own practice in my neighborhood and doing the same types of
How
cases that
did
I
you
do.
get to that place, Kate? Tell us.
Well, I've done a lot of mindset work all over the place, and I truly I believe in abundance, and I believe that the universe is on our side, and I know that people struggle and suffer. Of course, doing the work that I do, I don't mean to say that that isn't present. Um, but it's that belief, and many times and repeat examples of it in my own life where I could have felt or even did feel threatened by someone, and then in the end they ended up being a friend and a collaborator. I mean, I'm thinking of right now, I don't know that I've even ever told her that at one point I was threatened by her, but I have a friend one of my best friends, who moved into my town, practiced the same law that I did, like lived in my neighborhood. Kids were in not exactly the same school, but it's like on its face, I was like, oh my gosh, this person is like me. She's gonna take over. And then we got close and became good friends. And she ended up closing her law practice and launching this incredible nonprofit. And now I'm her board chair, and we do stuff together all the time. It's just like, but that is just one
Yeah.
example of like, it just happens all the time. And I just, what it does is it makes, friendship so much more possible when you're not threatened, and you don't believe in true competition. Um,
Such so well said. And really, if you stop and think, had you decided that, oh, she's competition, I'm going to stay away from her, you would have shut that door on not just friendship, which I think is paramount, and community, and really camaraderie and aligning with people, but also to the possibility that now you're on her board, and you said board chair, I think, and all these other great things that came of it. So
yeah.
I think the lesson for us women lawyers is, look, men and women are wired differently. I've done the research. Alison Armstrong, go look her up, has done the research. Men are just more competitive by nature because they were the ones, as Alison said, that were hunting the deer. There was one deer and all these mouths to feed, and they had to get the deer to feed their family. While we as women were gathering the berries in the meadows with one another with the babies on our backs, right? So it was a very collaborative, diffused awareness kind of situation, as Allison says. And so we're just not wired to be as competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And when we become competitive, we lack everything. We miss everything that you say. But also, I think it causes us to be inauthentic and untrue to who we are. It feels weird. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
don't even know how to do that, right? I remember being a securities lawyer in DC, and I thought, okay, I have to look like the men and act like the men. So I'm going to strap down my chest. I'm going to pull my hair back and spend hours straightening my hair. Hello, my hair is curly. I was like sweating every morning trying to do this. And it didn't feel right. It felt off.
Yeah.
And so, with all that we're talking about these days with equality and being the gender or the pronoun that you want to be, I think it's really important for us to remember that it starts with us and our decision that, hey, I'm okay with this and I'm not going to compete and I'm going to be open to friendships. And it's such a strong, beautiful, potent brand, right? People look at you and go, oh, she's not afraid. And it's all subconscious. People are not consciously saying that, but they're like, if she can handle that person, then I wonder what she can do with my clients. like for referral wise, or I wonder what she can do just with people. So I think there's a lot to be said there. What's the next lesson? You got another one?
Well, I do, and it's like it wasn't prepared. It's just related to something a wise person once said to me, and it was about, this was early in my marriage. I've now been married 16 years, I think, and I'm really happily married. My husband is a total hunk, and we've done a lot of work together, and we have a strong, solid marriage. But it wasn't always that way. We had to work really hard to get there. So early in my marriage, I used to, compare my marriage to what I saw other marriages. And I remember talking to one of my stepmom's friends, who's a very wise woman. And it was like, tell me about your marriage. Like, how did you and your husband do this? And she said, give yourself the gift of non-comparison. And those words just obviously stuck with me, and became a mantra. And it's related to the competition. I mean, it's like I think, especially in our youth, before we really get to know who we are, it's just so wonderful turning 40 and just being who you are. But in your youth, you're looking at all of these other people, and whether it be, their GPA or their clerkship or their job or their marriage or their purse or their friends or it's like, we could just kill ourselves looking at other people and comparing them to our own self. And it's torture. And you're never, and now I can tell my daughter this because I see her doing it. It's like there is always going to be someone who's richer or, prettier or has more electronics. And it's like, it's a never ending game. And the moment that you give yourself the gift of non-comparison in all of the arenas, it's true freedom. And now, like I said, I don't claim to be perfect. I'm sure tomorrow I will be challenged because, that's the way it works.
How we grow.
It is. But now when I look at somebody and they have something that seems really cool, like something I would want, I see it as a possibility. Like that is something that I could add to my arsenal of me, rather than, why do they have that and I don't?
Yeah. So you've taken away the envy or the green-eyed monster. And I really had to work on that too. So now you look at that person and go, bless you for having that. Good on you. You must have really worked hard for it. I mean, I think we assume things drop in people's laps and we're the only ones working hard, right? I went through that. I still go, I catch myself, and it's a real mindset work, perspective, and self-awareness, which is what I teach in branding all the time. Are you self-aware of that, what you're projecting out there and what you're getting back? Because that is not the abundant mindset you're talking about that leads to the firm growth like you've had. Because if you can't give that person the benefit of the doubt that they worked hard for it, and you bless them and say, oh, I'm going to get creative with that, and I'm going to take what they have and say, I could add that to my, what did you call it? It was a beautiful, beautiful word.
Oh, my arsenal of me.
Arsenal. Right. Yeah. And then perhaps you can have that too, if you want it. And it creates freedom and options. And I think as women lawyers, we think we're kind of boxed into this hole, or whatever the word is. And now we've got kids and the pandemic, and I still have to produce results, and they don't respect me. All these things may be, but if you do a reframe and change your perspective on it and say, good on you, and this is how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to take that and say, I have freedom and latitude because I am the driver of the abundance, no one else. And the universe wants it for me. It's not against me. So you really don't have the victim mentality at that point then, right? I think that's what you've used to get to where you are, if I'm correct in surmising what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that fits. That feels right.
You got one more lesson?
Oh gosh.
For instance, go ahead. No, for instance, the firm growing the way it has.
Sure. Yeah, it was related to that. I started the firm 6 years ago. Last month, we just had our 6th anniversary, and I
can't believe it's only been 6 years.
I know. It's been a pretty full 6 years.
I bet it has.
But we had, I had one employee, and I was terrified. It was a former coworker of mine at the nonprofit. She was amazing. And so I was like, do you want to come do this? And she said yes. And I just I remember I was just panicked that night thinking, someone else has made a major life decision based on a promise that I have made to them. That is a
Oh.
huge burden. But now I have like, I think 45 people on the team. So it is, I carry a lot of responsibility for a lot of lives, but I love it. I'm so happy. But the lesson that I was going to share, about the firm growth, because I have a lot I could say about growing a law firm. I'd be happy to talk all about that. But I think the thing that has kept me happy and kept the firm truly growing and also being a place where other people are attracted to it, not only to become clients, but to become team members. Like we have this really cool team culture at the law firm, and that's because cool people are attracted to it. But, you know, I never let go of that story that I told you, about the baby in detention. And so that has always been a guiding principle for the firm. And the firm has continued to do a lot of pro bono work, which I know that's not unique. But it has been such a major part of who we are in the public and with our clients and within the team, so that every time there's a border crisis related to migrant families, the firm at some level is on the front lines of that intentionally. So that like when the family detention centers opened in Central Texas, the firm led a monthly pro bono trip of non-immigration lawyers who were interested in the issue, wanted to get involved. We went down once a month and helped families get through their asylum interviews. And these are lawyers who never did that kind of thing before. And then when the family separations happened, were really involved and launched a project to get separated moms placed with pro bono attorneys. A lot of this has been about connecting the legal community to pro bono opportunities in immigration, just because that's the way that I love to get involved. And, working with migrant kids. Anyway, there's just been a lot of that. And I remember early on, like in the first year or two of the firm, I was really busy. I was still doing most of all of the lawyer work at the firm, managing the people, building the systems, like all the things that you have to do. I was still really involved in all of that. And it was a lot. It was so much for me. And I was meeting with one of my business coaches, and I was like, I think I just have to I can't remember what it was. I have to let this one project go. And it was one of these migrant family pro bono projects. And she said, no, you don't. You do not let that go. That is why you are here, and you make space for that if that's what matters to you. And so I kept it going. And then it just was, it wasn't like opportunities came because of that, or maybe that they did. But that decision point at that moment was like, it gave me permission to keep doing the stuff that I loved and the reason that I was there. And I honestly think that's the reason the firm has been successful, because we never let that go. And so I think it sounds really trite when I say it like this, but like holding on really tight to the why of whatever business, whether it's like the Subway shop down the road, like, why are you opening this Subway shop right now? Tell people about that and don't let go of that.
It's a very good point, and it's a point I love hearing you as a woman lawyer make, a successful woman lawyer, because we harp on it, right? In boot camp or wherever I am at, I'm like, you have to really be firm. And it is the trite statement of what's your why, but really, like, why are you getting up in the morning? And remember that story and make time for those things. And there's popcorn. And it's okay.
Someone just came home. So we need to see what's going on real quick. She's not usually a barker.
See, these things happen, folks.
Yeah, maybe
life happens. And I think it's very, very important for everyone to remember that life happens, and you have to stay grounded and focused on the whatever motivates you emotionally. And it's kind of like with my career, my second career here, it has really been all about, I do what I need to do and I do what I love to do. And everybody who works for me always says, you got your hands in so many things. And I'm like, yeah, it's really important for me. And I juggle it and I make time. And when I'm too many things going on, I've learned to just constantly step back. Every day in my meditations, I hear less is more, less is more. I'm always trying to figure out how less can be more, but I'm learning. And I think that's really what you're telling us, that you've learned along the way. But you've also taken that big first step of hiring that first employee, not knowing how you're going to pay them. And I read something recently that really was beautiful. The definition of responsibility is really having the ability to respond ability, and
Uh-huh.
trusting and having faith that I will respond with finding the money to pay them, supporting them, growing them, and being complete in that. And that really is all we have to go by. And so I have it taped right here. I have the ability to respond, so that anytime I'm like frazzled, I'm like, I got this. The right thing will happen because I have the ability to respond.
I like
So
that.
let me ask you, thank you. What do you say to the people that say, but you're a blonde haired, beautiful, blue eyed woman from Texas? Why should I believe that you're the immigration folks' biggest advocate? You're not a Hispanic male or a
Oh,
Hispanic
yeah.
woman, or, you know, and I think we've already talked about it, but can you put it succinctly why that doesn't matter here?
Well, no one's ever said that to me, so I haven't had to prepare a response. But
That's good.
I am very aware of, you know, frankly, just not being a white savior. I'm not here saving immigrants. I am an advocate and I am a teammate, and that is the way that I treat my clients, of course, and that is the way that I treat my social media followers. That I'm never going to just do an ad, that's just like telling them, to do this thing. And I think about like every social media post that I do, every video that I put out is about information to inform and empower the
Mm-hmm.
immigrant community, so that they can make the decisions that they need. And it's the same thing when people come into our office for a consultation. I think a typical legal consultation is, okay, tell me your story. When did you get to the country? How many times have you entered? What's your spouse? It's like getting the data that you need to assess the strategy for this client. And we don't approach it that way. We extend our consultations and we get into a conversation with them about where are you in your life now in terms of where you live, what kind of job you have, how do you feel about your relationships, where do you want to be in your life, and what's the
Mm-hmm.
difference there, and what happens if you take this particular action versus that. It's like totally not a typical legal consultation. And so I think, just that philosophy permeates everything. And I probably, there are people out there that look at me and go, oh my God, she's just some white lady thing and she's saving everybody. But anybody I think who knows me or actually spends time with me realizes that that's not what's going on.
And I think that's why you rarely get that comment, or never have until I asked you, because when people see your passion and your story, that speaks for itself. And that's really what I want our audience to remember here, that you can look like and be whoever you are. It doesn't even matter. Like I'm setting up this nonprofit for old dogs, senior citizens, and foster kids that have aged out of the system. I've never been any of those three categories, right? But when I talk about it, people are like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And because I do it from the heart, it has nothing to do with work. And I just so believe in that mission that I don't need to be a foster kid, an old person, or an old dog to show up and actually be believable, because the alignment is there naturally. So I think I want everyone to really stop and think about that. You don't have to have a response, and defenselessness is certainly a beautiful way to show up and just say, I don't need to have an answer for everything and I don't need to defend myself. But it's based on the story and how powerfully you show up, owning who you are and your mission in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, the second part of my interviews and these podcasts are really about you showing up with an issue or a challenge and allowing me to coach you through it and brainstorm with you, because I think our audience learns so much knowing that you're not perfect. You've got challenges going on, and what's yours, and let me coach you, and then they learn so much from it. So what's on your plate these days? I know you got a lot, but just pick one.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna just like be real. real vulnerable and honest here. So hopefully somebody will get something out of this. But I think people often look at me and think like, oh, she's got everything down. Like she's managing all of this really well. It all looks good. Um, but what's true is that I I worry a lot. I worry about my kids all the time. In the middle of a pandemic, I worry about my clients. I worry about politics. I worry about and I almost have created this pattern where I feel overly responsible and have this like false belief that somehow I'm in control of big picture stuff, and that my reaction in the belief that I somehow control things is to worry all the time, which of course gets nothing done. Um, and it's a pattern that I really, really want to break because it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my kids. I think, but I think I'm good at like shielding the people around me from it. So it really can be like an internal turmoil for me. And I've had two pregnancies with my two daughters, and with both pregnancies, they were high risk. I had preeclampsia both times. And they knew I was going to have preeclampsia, or they suspected it in my first pregnancy. And so I was watched closely, and I was just a wreck. Even though like I was an earth goddess, I felt great. I didn't get sick. I love being pregnant. I was in my head a total mess. And when I got pregnant again with my second daughter, and I had another high risk pregnancy, something just kind of snapped in me. Like, I can't do that again. I can't worry that hard for that many months straight. And so there was just this moment, and I remember it pretty clearly, where it was like, I don't have any control over this. So what the heck am I doing? And I just let it go. And I had this like blissful pregnancy the second go around because I was able to
Let it go.
And actually acknowledge that I had no control. And I'm noticing that in my whole life, I'm gripping in this belief that I somehow control. Like, when am I going to get back in my house after they discovered black mold all throughout the attic? Is my daughter going to get COVID during this Delta variant surge in preschool? Like, whatever. All of these things, but that I, frankly, in the ultimate, like, I can make little decisions here and there, but I really don't have control.
No.
My mom, I love her. She's my best friend. And I worry about when she's going to die. Like, that is something I have no control over. So
Right.
why do I spend this time torturing myself? And I really don't know. I'm aware, but I don't know how to let it go.
Thank you for being truly, like you said, so vulnerable. It's a question I think that plagues all of us as humans, and especially as moms and professionals and women, lawyers, whatever the profession is. We just either are not wise enough to have self-awareness around it. We haven't gotten there yet, or we're just so used to it that we think it's the norm. And so we just imagine if we didn't have that, how like profound and effective and mover and shaker more we could be, right?
Totally.
So it's something that I actually work on all the time too. And my mantra has become let it go. So let me ask you, and I know you've probably heard this many times, but there's always a negative payoff that we have to the way we're being. And I think of this for myself with my worry, because I was raised by a hypochondriac mom, beautiful woman, like a great mom, but that was her thing, worry and guilt, right? So, what is the negative payoff for you worrying about all this and yet knowing, let's just say, frankly, better? What do you get?
I think it's a sense of control.
Okay, yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. You're a very good person to coach because you're advanced in all this. Sometimes it takes me hours to get people to really wrap their head around that. And as women, we have this issue with being controlling but not in control. And we talk about this in depth in boot camp because it impacts how people see us, right? And it impacts our ability to be happy, most importantly over everything. But also when we show up, we're that person that's sucking the life out of everything, that's choking everything because we're being controlling because we don't feel in control. And by throttling life and being the bottleneck at work, and all the paperwork stops on my desk because I've got to double check it, but I don't have time. So it just sits there. All those things, and being rude to people, and the beatings will continue until morale improve, right? That kind of concept keeps happening because we feel like that's how we manage our stress and that's how we get it together. And it's the opposite. If you go out and look at people that are truly in control, they're just sitting back and letting life flow over them. My grandfather used to always say, you can either be that tree that kind of just, when the wind comes and the wind goes over it, or you can just like fight that wind and snap. And, that visual has been said before, but I just always remember being a kid and him saying that. And I was like, what does that mean? But so people who are in control just kind of go with it. So where could you go with it? And how can you fight that negative payoff of being in control? Who would you be, Kate, if you let that go and didn't need to be controlling? You would be in control, but who would you be and how would you be showing up differently for yourself, your family? How would life be different?
I think I would be more playful. But frankly, I think this is more an internal thing than an external thing. My husband understands it about me because I share it with him. But I do a really good job at shielding the world
Mm-hmm.
from this aspect of me. And so I think this is more like internally, like
Internal.
how do I feel when I wake up in the morning and, all throughout the day, like all throughout the day. Thankfully, I don't have trouble sleeping. I don't have trouble falling asleep. Like, thank God for
That's
that.
because you get so much going on. So two things I want you to self-work I want to give you.
Okay.
One is really stepping back and going into your story that you remember you wrote in boot camp. And you've probably rewritten that story. People call it the story of origin. I call it the personal connection story. Go back to your childhood and see where you felt like you had to step into that role and be in control internally. Like, what were you deflecting, making up for? Who were you taking care of and shielding? We do that at a very early age. And it's probably an adult in your life, right? And then the second part of it becomes, if you find the solution to that, or even if you don't, how are you externalizing that now? And how can you become more playful for yourself? What's one little thing you can do? I love your colors of yellow and the secondary colors that you've got. It's truly playful, but what is one activity you could do every day for yourself between your two ears, right? That would allow you to be more playful. We see the playful, but we want that external to match the internal so that
Yeah.
you can even sleep more soundly, and knowing that, Winnie's going to have the day she's going to have, and you shouldn't have any control over that, right? Because the playfulness of it is what keeps her safe, right? And her stress low and your stress low and keeps her immunity up, right? And the doctors listening to this probably are going to be like, she's crazy. That's okay. That's another episode we can talk about. But I think most people have seen the research behind that. Stress causes dis-ease. And so
Yeah.
what could you be doing for yourself to keep your life more playful? Just for Kate, little things.
Well, okay. So, you know how they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and how you eat breakfast will shape the eating choices that you make throughout the day. So, I think I want to start at the moment of wake up.
Perfect.
And my current, whatever, ritual, can't believe I'm calling it that, is to look at my phone and see what
Yeah.
notifications have come in over the night. So I would love to replace that with something intentionally lighthearted and joyful.
What would that be? Yeah, that's the big question. But you've gotten to 99% of it. But just pick that one thing and try it on.
I mean, honestly, like a little dance, just
Perfect.
do a little dance.
Perfect. Whatever it is conditions you, right, differently. And I often talk about this, starting your morning. Richard Branson talks about that, right? I forget what he calls his mornings, but if it works for him, I think it could work for the rest of us. He does not check email first thing in the morning. He puts this is what I do based on what he does. I put my feet over the side of the bed and I say a little prayer of gratitude, whatever that means for you. You don't even have to be religious, right? Whatever that means to set my morning up right. And then I still don't look at my phone because I am not a doctor. No one is going to die on my watch, right? At some point, you have to have enough standard operating procedures in place to know that, I show up at this hour and whatever's going on is going to take care of itself. And if you're listening and you're new, then you still should have those procedures for yourself, right? You should not be conditioned to be reactive to your clients because that is going to hurt them and your family. So set some kind of a morning ritual for yourself where you wake up with a little dance, or maybe you color the first thing you wake up, or maybe you journal the first thing you wake up. And I interviewed Byron Katie for the American Bar Association years ago, and we were talking about this, and I said, what do you say to the women that just don't have time? And she said, get up even earlier. Get up at 4:30 in the morning if that's what it takes to create that time for yourself, to create that playfulness. And I'm glad you've got thoughts on that because I think I was guilty of this. I'm like, I don't even know how to have fun anymore, right? I don't even know how to be playful anymore. What does that mean? And just a couple of days ago, I just decided to take a Friday afternoon off and I went to the beach. I live like 15 minutes from the beach. How often do you think I go to the beach? So it doesn't have to be anything that drastic. Maybe that's not drastic in your world, but for me it was like just to get up and go to the beach right by myself. But take some action that you normally wouldn't, and it's just for you and your heart. It doesn't impact Josh and the kids. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Little things, really, not even a big thing. Byron Katie said, take your cup of coffee, sit on the patio, and think about one thought that's been running through your head, and just sit with that thought. And so I think if you do those two bits of self work, you'll start conditioning yourself differently and then you'll be more in control, because right now it sounds like the day takes you with it and you're not in control. So then we ramp into, let me think about winning, what's going to happen to her at school, because now I feel like I have something to control, but it's really not happening. You can't control that, that logically. Does that help?
Oh, totally. Yeah. In fact, in my house, we just installed French doors into the patio from our bedroom. So I have this beautiful morning sitting area waiting for me upon my
Fabulous.
return.
Fabulous. And look, don't wait until you return. Start now, right? Because I want you even more fabulous and out there creating change for people. Just imagine, this should be your impetus. If you get this, and you will, when you get this, even, this is the when is whenever you choose to start, right? You fall into your greatness. But when you do, then all those people around you become beneficiaries of you even more than they already are. And that's amazing. And that's what I want for you. And that's what I want for every women lawyer listening, right? Just really for us to show up and be at our best selves and to love ourselves and to provide into the legal profession a modeling of who we are so others can choose bits and pieces of that and create their own realities from that. Sound good?
Yes, and thank you for teaching me, and thank you for teaching all of the women. I love to imagine the ripple effect of the impact you have had on so many lives, and people, just living bigger, brighter lives because of what you do. So thank you. I'm so glad that we have crossed paths and that you are my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. You made my month. And
Oh,
to all of the women listening, where can we find you, Kate, if we want to learn more about your firm, see how you're doing it, maybe get in touch with you? How can we
sure.
find you?
Yeah, my website is my last name, Lincoln-Goldfinch.com. It's Lincoln like Abraham, Goldfinch like the bird.
And that's where she is, folks. And we'll drop it in the show notes. And I hope you all have learned something. Take away from it. Role model it for yourself. Find your value. Your equality lies within you, as Kate has so eloquently said. And I want to thank you, Kate, for being my guest. I know you're super busy. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being who you are. And thank you to all the people who are listening, women, men, however way you identify yourself. You yourself are a gift, and we're happy to have you as listeners. And until next time, Ketichi out.